everyone. Welcome to Uncorked with Holli
and Jeanna.
Okay, Jeanna, today what we're doing is something very, very special. We've been waiting a while for this beautiful, wonderful person to come and join us today. But listen,
my patience meter and my factor, like if you're scoring patience and you know who you are as a human, went up.
Oh yeah,
but I'm excited. I don't have to wait any longer.
So she helped heal you.
Yes,
your
she did. Yes.
Okay.
Listen.
So listen, today, everyone, hold on to your hats because what is happening is. What the hell is going on? I mean, Jeanna, you got to go look. What the hell?
Early in the morning.
What the hell is going on with this pandemic and anxiety?
Oh, listen.
What the hell is going on? And is it a spiritual problem? And what the hell do we do about it? Yes. And you know what? We've got a badass lady in the house ready to talk about this. And she is qualified, overqualified.
More than me.
Oh, we can't answer this question, Jeanna. We are unqualified. Unqualified. So in the house today, we have Dr. Ellen Vora. It's our pleasure. She is an MD, board certified psychiatrist. She does acupuncture. She could poke you with pins, Jeanna.
I do love that.
We love that. And a yoga teacher. Then we can go do our Shavasana with her. Okay.
I do love Shavasana.
That's
my favorite part.
I know. It's true. And okay.
Tree and Shavasana. I mean, I nail those every time. Yep.
And what is super exciting today is that she is the author of a best-selling book, The Anatomy of Anxiety. And that is understanding and overcoming the body's fear response. I love that in the title. So welcome, Dr. Ellen Vora.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
We are so thrilled you're here and well worth the wait. And I'm excited to share this conversation with our audience for sure. So how we like to start our podcast, Dr. Ellen. Do you say Dr. Ellen? Dr. Vora?
Dr.
V. Call me Ellen.
Dr. E.
Dr. V. E.V.
Oh, yeah. Sounds very...
Earned value. I think about earned value.
Oh, yeah. You're an accountant. Well, I mean, I don't know. That sounds like a spy name. I kind of like that. But Ellen, at your request, Ellen. So Ellen, tell us a little bit about kind of who you are at your core, your kind of the milestones of Ellen, Dr. Ellen, and how you arrived to where you're at today. That I think would be helpful to set a really good foundation for our listeners before we dive into some questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
So at my core, I started off this journey in a very conventional way. I went to medical school. I was in crisis in medical school. I was quite a disenchanted med student, but I didn't yet have the vocabulary, the way of framing what felt so wrong to me about conventional medicine. So I was always in this state of limbo. I kept moving forward and proceeding, but kept wondering, should I drop out altogether and do something completely different? And part of the reason I was in crisis, it was a two-part crisis. On the one hand, I did not feel convinced that I was actually helping my patients thrive. I wondered sometimes if I was violating that first principle of medicine, which is first do no harm. And I really felt disenchanted with what I had been taught and that it wasn't really the keys to the kingdom to helping humanity heal and feel good in their bodies. And in parallel with that, I was a mess. I was physically unwell, mentally unstable. I really was not okay. I was like a machine with all the springs popping out. I had a malar rash, these signs of autoimmunity in my blood work, joint pain, ocular migraines, headaches, polycystic ovary syndrome, couldn't get a period, couldn't poop to save my life. Wow. Nothing was working.
Wow.
And I was doing everything quote unquote right. And I would go to see my gynecologist, my primary care doc, and they'd say, your blood work looks fine, you're fine. And I would come back and say, but I'm not fine. I'm not getting my period. I cannot poop. Everything hurts. And you know, they'd say, well, you seem stressed and let's put you back on the pill. And have you thought about Prozac? And so that was a head scratcher for me. I knew on some level this couldn't possibly be the cure for what's going on here. And I really had to think about the fact that I am the product of 500 or so generations of successful reproduction. Why at 23 years old was I not getting a period? Why was I suddenly infertile? Was there something environmental participating in that? So that got me started down a line of thinking that was, should we be doing things fundamentally differently? And then I just as a way of surviving med school, started pursuing other disciplines, other ways of thinking about health and healing. I studied Chinese medicine and acupuncture, studied nutrition, functional medicine, psychedelic medicine, Ayurveda. I became a yoga teacher. And all of that helped me have more tools, but also a very different paradigm for understanding the health of the human body. And somewhere along that journey, probably the most important thing that happened was that I got kind of hit over the head with, wait a second, I've been disavowing my own intuition all this time as a form of performing masculine, objective, rational ways of thinking and being to be acceptable, to be approved of, to gain entrance into the boys' club. And I realized, holy shit, I've been silencing this part of myself, and it's come from a place of self-loathing misogyny, and I've been missing out. And now my intuition, my connection to spirituality, this is a very critical compass in how I navigate decisions. It's also what gives my life meaning and a through line to fulfillment. And so that's been a really pivotal juncture along that journey of figuring out, how can I practice medicine in a way that is in alignment?
Oh, I love that. So did I mention that she is from Yale and Columbia? So for her medicine, for her degrees. And so did you learn, do those institutions teach this, or you use that as the foundation because you're practicing functional medicine, which is where I want you to explain what functional medicine is as opposed to, I guess, allopathic medicine. And then as it pertains to mental health, I mean, that's I mean, the root cause of all of that is, so I want you to talk a little bit about that, and how do those institutions actually teach that? Okay, I have no idea. And so if you can just expand on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, there's a quick answer to that question, which is no, they don't.
So, but I didn't want to presume anything.
But it's not even just those elite institutions don't teach it. I think it's just it's a fundamental framework around the medical training in this country, correct?
Yeah, we're not there yet. And these institutions change slowly. And with a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of medical legal inertia. And if you think about the type of person who makes it into medicine, we're typically someone who is happy to jump through hoops. We're happy to stay on a track and check a lot of boxes. And it really requires so much delayed gratification, and really in certain ways, so much in the box thinking to make it through all of those milestones.
The rigor.
So it's rare to have someone make it through that decade and then be like, hey, wait a minute, let's do this all completely differently. It's a rare person that has both of those traits. I feel like I just have a combination of perfectionism and a sort of steady, earthy Capricorn rising persistence.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
While also being such a weirdo. And so I feel like that helped me arrive at a place of making it through, but also wanting to do things differently. And I have kindred spirits out there, which is nice, but I certainly wasn't taught this way in these institutions. So functional medicine, let's define it. The best definition I've come across is that rather than what we do in conventional medicine is symptom suppression. We say, hey, you have heartburn. Okay, let's give you an antacid. Then you're no longer making stomach acid, and then you no longer have heartburn. Problem solved. And functional medicine is root cause resolution. And the central question is always why. So you might go to your doctor and say, I have heartburn. And the first question is, I wonder why you're experiencing heartburn. What's the root cause here? Is it that you have increased abdominal pressure? If so, then why? Are you obese? Are you pregnant? Do you have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth exerting a pressure upward? And if that's the case, why do you have that? And let's address that. So you just keep exploring the why until you really understand the fundamental root of a problem. You address it on that level, and then you obviate the need to ever give a symptom suppressive agent, because you no longer have symptoms, because you've addressed the problem at the root. We're in a moment now where little by little, we're seeing functional medicine take a seat at the table in the realm of how we practice medicine. It's still very much not mainstream, but it's happening.
Absolutely.
And with mental health, it's time. Let's
It
do
is
this. Mental
time.
health is no different.
Yeah.
And that is a fundamental paradigm shift in understanding mental health, is rather than thinking this is a genetic chemical imbalance and our depression or anxiety are a destiny and a fixed trait, and it's genetic, it just means you have low serotonin, and focusing on it from the neck up, let's actually expand our thinking and realize this too has a root cause. And when it comes to mental health issues, my belief is that for the most part, the root cause is either some form of physical imbalance, and we can talk about some of the different forms that contribute, or psychospiritual imbalance. And that's where it's really our fundamental human needs going unmet.
Psychospiritual. I love that.
I do
Did
too.
you coin that, or is that something that's out there? Like that I think it's a spiritual crisis.
Yes.
In a lot of ways. So you talk in your book, you talk about false anxiety and true anxiety, and maybe you can just define that, and then we'll go back to, you know, because I loved your perception of that. Like, not all anxiety is bad.
No.
Right. Yeah. So false anxiety, which now a year and a half into a book tour, I've realized is an incredibly triggering term.
Yes.
So
Right.
I'll clarify.
In that people feel like, you know, you're saying that,
they're not
their
real.
feelings are not real, or they're fake, or not true.
Yeah.
That's
core.
not what you're saying.
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
That is
And
not what
I'll-
you're saying. Yeah.
I want to give full credit to my editor who, like, day one of this project with me was like, I'm not sure people are going to love that term. I was like, it's going to be fine. It was very right.
Glass half full and glass half empty. Yeah.
But to clarify it, a false anxiety is avoidable anxiety. We can just switch out the term avoidable. And the idea here is it's the anxiety that's existing and happening in our physical body. And that's something that we have to start to appreciate. Mental health issues, even though they manifest as something we experience from our mind and our thoughts, they can have a physical basis. And false anxiety, avoidable anxiety, occurs when something has tipped our physiology out of balance and generated a stress response, which we then subjectively experience as anxiety or even panic. But it has usually a pretty innocuous aspect of modern life at the root. We're maybe sleep deprived, or we're in a blood sugar crash. We had an extra cold brew coffee that day. We're inflamed, we're hungover. And this is generating a stress response, which we then experience as anxiety. We would do well to address it at that level of the physical body, and then we can eliminate unnecessary suffering. And that's the idea with false anxiety. This is unnecessary suffering. I don't call it false to invalidate the very real suffering involved, but that it has a straightforward basis. It doesn't need to be happening. It's not our deep inner truth.
Right.
True anxiety, very much on the other hand, is our deep inner truth. And this is not a type of anxiety that we want to suppress. This is not something we want to pathologize. In fact, true anxiety is not even what's wrong with us. It is what's right with us when we are able to viscerally connect to what's wrong in the world. So this is our inner compass. It's asking us, nudging us. It's saying, slow down, pay attention. You know, on some level, something is out of alignment here. And it could be in our personal lives, it can be in our communities, it can be in the world at large, but it's tapping on us and saying, come on, admit it. If you really slow down and get honest with yourself, you realize that you need to course correct in some way. And that's something that we don't want to pathologize. We really want to get good at listening to and honoring in our lives.
Yeah, it's an invitation to make changes. And if you don't listen to that true part of you, then you end up in the avoidable anxiety. Is that what we're calling it? Not false anxiety, avoidable anxiety. Is that sort of how that can manifest that way, but doesn't have to? Is that what you're going to say?
I feel like that's a deep metaphysical interpretation of this paradigm, where like when we ignore our psychospiritual needs, it creates physical imbalance in the body. I agree with that. Although I mean it in a more simplistic way.
Okay,
like,
gotcha.
If we ignore our true anxiety remains.
Yeah.
And it sometimes goes from a whisper to a shout.
That's
But
what I
you're
think
right.
is spiritual. Yeah. So
Right.
Yes,
Yes.
we call it the universal 2x4.
Yeah, I know.
You know, when you get like, you realize
Ignore it.
and then finally it just
Wow.
like smacks you right across the
Yeah.
face. You just can no longer ignore it, right?
So
That's
how
right.
do we know if we have anxiety? How do we know, like, whether, how do we know whether it's just like we have a problem in our body somehow or it's related to anxiety? Is there a way of knowing that?
Here's what I think about that. Very good question. Is that I don't think that the answer is where it's at. Because I think that for the most part, we're in a cultural moment where the pH of this stew that we're swimming in, the common way that we subjectively identify our states of feeling unwell, we call that anxiety these days. So we don't need a lot of help on a cultural, societal level having our anxiety pointed out to us. Most people are saying, they're coming to me and saying, I'm anxious. And so to me, like the more interesting work is what's at the root. For those few people that are not subjectively identifying with this word anxiety, but we might look on from the outside and be like, migraines, stomach problems, can't relax, like they're anxious and they don't realize it. Okay, once in a while somebody's not connecting with that term. But I also think we're living in a moment right now, and this is very much influenced by the pharmaceutical industry, allopathic medicine, which is telling us there's something 1-0 about anxiety, that some people have true blue clinical anxiety and some people are just stressed. And we're trying to gatekeep something there. And I don't buy it for a second. I think that, of course, there's a difference in degree of how anxious some people are, but I don't think there's quite that same difference in kind that paradigm, that duality is intending to suggest. Meaning they're trying to say some people have real genetic anxiety and they require medication. And some people are just stressed and they need to stop complaining. And so I think that I really think that if you're suffering in any way, trust that. And we all deserve a pathway to find relief from that suffering. And I just don't think that when we're saying that something is real, true blue anxiety, it implies that's the real thing, that has a genetic basis, that can only be treated with a pill. And actually, it's all the same shit. I hope it's okay to curse.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so basically, somebody who's very anxious, I'm still doing the same investigative work to understand what's their root cause. I'm still not satisfied to just chalk this up to a genetic chemical imbalance, that they were always destined to be anxious. I'm still thinking about, are they inflamed? Are they chronically sleep deprived from sleep apnea? Are their hormones out of whack? Do they have micronutrient deficiencies? Are they intolerant to something that they're eating? Is there something off in their gut health? Is their blood sugar swinging on a wild roller coaster ride all the time? Are they always just chronically hungover? I'm thinking about the same physical root causes and, of course, the same psychospiritual root causes, because those are still the root causes, even when someone is suffering from severe anxiety.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know.
Well, what a gift that is to hear, honestly, for anyone suffering that, even if you might have a more, severe case of it when it does affect you, that there are things that we have within our control. It's not something that you are hardwired for, that you're going to have to deal with your whole life. I mean, some people may be hardwired, so they'll have to manage themselves a little bit differently and really work a little harder at it than others. But the fact that it's not something that because I've heard that from many people, including, my son has had it. I worry about it. Like, I don't want to have to take medicine my entire life.
That's what we hear. It's like, I hear so many times that, like, I don't want to take medicine. We both have family members and my whole life. And what you're saying is, and I've heard you say this, so you can speak to it, but like, it's not that you're against medicine. It's like, if it's needed, you did the mountain analogy. I think this is really great. I love that.
Yeah, no,
but there's relief here in these other things. So maybe we can talk about, and you were sort of getting to like hormones. And so there's a relief, and that's, I feel like, and maybe this is our culture. It's like, I'm having a crisis moment. I need a pill. So they'll get a pill. I mean, we're just handing them out like candy right now, which I'm not saying anything bad about that.
When you see a normal doctor, you have 15 minutes to kind of get across your problems.
I had a family member that had a crisis, and I was like, yeah, give them a pill. Okay. But then like there is a journey to find out what is it physiological? Is it, what let's rule out things from a doctor perspective, which you were talking about, micronutrients, hormones, all of that stuff. But that's a journey.
Yes, it is a journey.
And so it's like, I feel like we're so impatient. Like, I want to feel better. I want to feel better now and then it's offered easily. You can get it easily. And this is harder to find. We're in Seattle. You're in New York, I think. And it's like, we have trouble finding good functional medicine. Like, where do you find these people? Where are you? You're a unicorn, Dr. Ellen.
I know. And where do we go to find it? Like, and what are the critical things we need to ask for just to kind of start this journey? Like,
so there's a lot of I don't know, we had a lot there.
I mean, I think Dr. Vora probably has anxiety now.
I know, she's like, let me talk and stop talking. Okay, go ahead.
You two are giving me anxiety.
There's so many threads I want to pull here.
Yeah,
so one is that you all are in Seattle, I believe. Bastyr University is there. If you Google functional medicine practitioners in your area, that's one way to find it. Not always. Sometimes it's prohibitively expensive. Sometimes they're not taking new patients and it's hard to get an appointment. I get all that. All else fails, see a naturopath. Naturopaths are the original functional medicine practitioners. We love to celebrate the ivory tower of someone having an MD or they're a doctor of osteopathy, but naturopaths do amazing work, more affordable typically, and they have that root cause resolution mindset and a vitalist understanding of the body, that this is a body that fundamentally works and can heal if you give it the right conditions. So just putting that aside, let's unify and sort of elegantly bring together everything you guys just brought up, because I think you're nailing the central reframe that's so critical and what I want people to take away most of all from our conversation. We've all come of age with this genetic chemical imbalance idea around mental health, that it's our low serotonin, that it's from our neck up. And it implies that our mental health issues are a destiny, a fixed trait, and that we're stuck. And it suggests that it's a genetic chemical imbalance that's corrected with a pill. If that works for you, if you saw the practitioner for 15 minutes and they gave you a prescription for an antidepressant and you found relief, great. I really am not dogmatically opposed to that. I'm a psychiatrist. This is my training. I prescribe medication. When it works, hallelujah. I'm not really interested in saying I am philosophically against pharmaceuticals. I'm in the business of decreasing human suffering. And when that's the path up that mountain of healing for somebody that works, this is a beautiful thing. And if you're one of those people, don't feel stigma or shame about taking medication. Take your meds and count yourself as fortunate that it helps you. That said, what I'm also keenly aware of is that there are millions of people right now for whom that has not been an adequate solution. They might have initially felt better on the meds and then the effect wanes over time, or they found that they get intolerable side effects, or maybe they've tried 50 different medications, nothing's really helped them, and they're starting to feel pretty demoralized and hopeless. And that's where I really want to swoop in and immediately change the conversation, because those folks who have not found satisfactory symptom suppression from conventional pharmaceuticals, and they're despairing and they're feeling like they might just be broken and it's beyond repair and nothing's going to work for them. I want to talk directly to those folks, because that narrative that we've had up until now that says this was a genetic chemical imbalance corrected with a pill and that's the only path up the mountain of feeling better, that is myopic, it's untrue, and it's our least hopeful narrative about mental health. So if that hasn't been the helpful framing for you, don't despair, because there's a very different way to think about mental health, where we start to realize that even if we just expand our lens to look at the evidence-based determinants of mental health, that list includes how we're sleeping, how we're feeding our bodies, whether or not we're moving, how inflamed we are, the degree to which we have inflammatory cytokine molecules coursing through our bloodstream, and also the more psychospiritual factors, like do we have community in our lives? Do we feel a sense of meaning and purpose? Do we have ritual, pleasure, play? All of these things are also evidence-based determinants of our mental health. And when we shift our focus to that list, these environmental things, the things we have more control over, this is ultimately a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset framing. It sees that we have some control over whether or not our genetic predispositions for mental health issues ever manifest into our mental health issues. We have environmental influence on that. We have some control. And so this is ultimately a message of empowerment and hope. And I think that we deserve this because it's the truth. And we've left a lot of people feeling hopeless when in fact there's so much they can do to feel better.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. I had goosebumps. That was very powerful. And so I want to, for our listeners, that speaks to them, for us.
Yes.
I want to give them a roadmap.
Yeah.
And so
Yes,
so the first thing that I think would be really important, because we can't hit everything in the time that we have here. And you tell me, you edit my list. You're my editor. so
Don't use the term false anxiety.
I just like to rebrand things, so she'll come up with something different.
I don't think you should ever feel wrong about that, because that was perfect as it went out. And so like I could get on my, and once people understand it, it's like, oh, I get it. I get it. Like there's nuance there. But okay, here's what I'm going to say for folks that, okay, you have a family member or you're feeling, here's the checklist of things. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go out and get your book, Anatomy of Anxiety, because you list everything in there that they can look at. And here's the thing. Not only are we swimming in the pH of, oh my God, I love her.
that. Yes.
Yes. We're swimming in the fact that we have to take the soup. Okay.
The stew. I think it was stew, which is a little bit darker and muddier than soup generally. So
yes. Okay. Yeah. So we have to take the power back personally about our bodies, our medicine, what works for us. We're in the driver's seat. We can't just go to one place. It's like we have to seek out.
Get curious.
Do
your own interpretation of how you're feeling, what you're doing. Pay attention.
I thought you were going to say an interpretive dance, Jeanna.
Oh, I could do that.
That could be good too, to get rid of your anxiety.
Yes.
Anyway, so what I'm saying is get the book and then find a functional medicine. Does it have to be a functional medicine
or
doctor?
Naturopathic.
Wait a second on that. Okay. And do they have to specialize in mental health? That's the first question. And then it's of the checklist. And then the second one is you go to a naturopath and you've read the book, so you need to check your micronutrients, you need to check your hormone levels, your thyroid, all that. Okay, so you're armed with what you're going to the naturopath for, and then even though those two doctors may not specialize in mental health like our unicorn here, our guest today. So can you go through that checklist and edit the hell out of it and make it yours? And let's make it applicable for everybody who's listening.
So I think we can actually have an even simpler roadmap.
Excellent.
And I'll say, you're right that we have to be in the driver's seat. And that's for two main reasons. One is that there are nefarious factors that mean that our system is kind of designed to keep us dependent and sick. And there's financial incentives that are all perverse and make us do all the wrong things. But then there's also just an accidental brokenness of the healthcare system, which is that well-meaning, hard-working, burned out doctors have 8 minutes with you and need to solve that problem.
I know.
And you're crying in their office and you have a whole catastrophe of a life.
Yes, and we feel bad for them. Yes.
What can I possibly do but hand over a prescription for Xanax?
Yes.
And so we're in a really tricky position. I also want to say this, which is that not just to sort of push my book. It could be my book. It could be somebody else's book. There are a lot of excellent books with a functional mindset framing. But you can start with a book. You don't necessarily have to start by seeing a functional medicine doc or naturopath or holistic health coach or whatever it is. You can start with a book because most of us are so out of balance that just doing those fundamentals that we can learn from a book, from a $20 book, that alone will solve a lot of our issues. And it's really only you want to go then make sure you see a naturopath if there's still something persistent and pesky. Thyroid issues would be a classic where someone did everything the functional medicine way and they're still so symptomatic. That's when I want them to see an enlightened naturopath or functional medicine doc to take a look at things like dysbiosis or thyroid. Thyroid in the conventional setting, they're typically only looking at TSH and T4, and they're basically saying, you're fine. But a person person can have a thyroid that's really compensating in the face of a lot of autoimmune antibody attack on that thyroid, and their TSH and T4 might look fine when they're really not fine. And that's actually the window of opportunity when we can intervene and prevent a full-blown thyroid issue. So I want someone to go see a naturopath or functional medicine doc, get the full Picasso cubist look at the thyroid, look at everything, not just TSH and T4, but also T3, reverse T3, thyroglobulin antibodies, thyroid peroxidase antibodies. Then with that view, is your thyroid really fine?
Right.
Or are you at an early stage of an autoimmune disease that we want to intervene on the level of healing the gut and eliminating things that are contributing to this autoimmune illness so that we can obviate the need for thyroid meds and eliminate the anxiety and depression all at once.
Wow.
So the actual roadmap is start with a book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get that, because there's a lot of nutritional, a lot of things that you can do yourself to make those changes.
Well, and I you know, just even in kind of your talking about setting up the whole concept of, you know, anxiety coming from within and not being a head issue per se, always, but it could be from within the body too. I mean, there are probably areas that might be causing, I know there's areas that might be causing anxiety that people aren't thinking of and aren't connecting the dots of this could be related to that. Because
Here's
it doesn't
like
show
three
up. Yeah.
classic examples of that I see in my practice all the time.
Great.
One is blood sugar. A lot of us are on the blood sugar roller coaster because the modern American diet is built on a foundation of coffee drinks that are secretly milkshakes and rosé all day. So our blood sugar spikes, then it crashes. And the design of the body is to react to a blood sugar crash by secreting our stress hormones. And there's biologic reasons for that, but it happens to have as a side effect that it can feel identical to anxiety or even panic. And this is just happening because our blood sugar is swinging all over the place. So we can eliminate a lot of unnecessary anxiety simply by keeping our blood sugar stable. And there's different ways to do that. Some of my patients are kind of up for the diet overhaul that keeps their blood sugar stable, which not only prevents anxiety, but is protective against heart disease, dementia. It improves your energy and cognitive function. But then also, some people aren't ready for a diet overhaul. That's fine. It's hard to do that. It's expensive to do that. I get it. It's triggering for many people to do that. So a hack that a lot of my patients use is to use something like a spoonful of almond butter or coconut oil. And that's something that's so slow to be digested and released into the bloodstream that it can give you this safety net of stable blood sugar, which can then blunt a blood sugar crash. And so some of my patients just take a spoonful of coconut oil before they brush their teeth at night, before they leave the office, so that they don't inevitably pick a fight with their partner like clockwork every day at 5:30 p.m. They basically keep their blood sugar stable to prevent these stress responses in their body. That's one classic thing we don't think to connect to anxiety, but it's happening. A hangover, like, you know, even not just a hangover, but the after effects of alcohol consumption, which is nobody's favorite conversation. But I think that I just like knowing the scientific truth, and then I will let that inform my choices. So with alcohol, part of the reason we like it is that it rushes our brain with GABA, the neurotransmitter gamma aminobutyric acid. And GABA feels great. It's our inhibitory neurotransmitter. It makes us feel calm and like everything's okay. And if it ended there, I would say alcohol is the best treatment for anxiety. But the brain doesn't really care whether or not we're calm or that we feel like everything's going to be okay. It's tasked with our survival. So when it sees all that GABA, it thinks if a leopard were to come around the corner, we'd be too buzzed to care and we could potentially be in danger. So it wants to restore us to homeostasis so that we have the appropriate level of fear to potential threats. And it does that in the case of alcohol by converting that GABA to a neurotransmitter called glutamate, which is excitatory. We feel more agitated when we're in that influence. And so when we've had a few drinks at dinner, oftentimes that GABA to glutamate conversion is really hitting our brains right around 2 or 3 in the morning. And I think that accounts for why we wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, thoughts racing. We proceed to toss and turn for the remainder of the night. We have lousy sleep, which in its own right impacts our anxiety levels the next day. But that GABA glutamate hangover is making us anxious. And it's not to say we should all forego alcohol forever and always. It's just knowledge that can help inform our choices. One night you might say, this is the right time to savor this special meal with the glass of wine. But another night you might just want to say to yourself, it's not worth it to me tonight to squander my sleep. I think I'll have a seltzer instead.
Yeah. No, I love that. Great. I wonder if Rosé all day can, before we go to bed, instead of taking an ibuprofen, we should have almond butter and water and almond butter. But you're right. I mean, sleep, I notice it. I mean,
that's a big deal.
You know, like you're right. Okay. All that. Like I struggle, like I start sweating in the
But I don't think a lot of people understand. I never understood that connection. I never did. But it makes sense. So basically what you're saying is, in order to kind of counterbalance this GABA, the body increases something to kind of counterbalance it a bit, to kind of make this a bit more tone deaf and heighten awareness, which creates this anxiety.
Exactly.
Conflict. Okay. Interesting.
I have a really important question now. That was really important. Everything's really important. Yes. Okay. But so with our young people, everybody's wanting to do pot and everybody's doing whatever. So we send our children, I'm talking more specifically, but we send our children to college and I don't know what the hell they're doing. Okay. But you know, they're doing college things, what we did, right? Okay. But maybe worse, I think, you know, right now it's a little bit more free flowing and, you know, thinking it's more normal. But when I was young, it was illegal to have pot or gummies or whatever form that takes, right? And so the question I have is, and I think I might be outdated, but the question is does that help anxiety or and I think this is,
we've heard
does it not?
Yes.
And then if you can just talk about, like, does plant medicine work and is that an approach in functional medicine?
Yeah, so cannabis in particular, that's a conversation full of nuance. And for the most part, the ways that it's different today than it was even 10 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, is that the strains have been engineered really and bred to be quite potent. And so what we're seeing now, not only is it legal, not only does it now sort of carry this stamp of it's safe, it's approved. And I will say, by the way, I do think of it as a lesser evil to certain alternatives. I think it's a safer sleep aid than Ambien. I think it's a better way to kick back and relax than alcohol. I think that it contributes less to traffic accident fatalities and domestic violence than other ways that we recreate. But I think that it has downsides as well. It can be good medicine, it can be bad medicine. And I think these days what's concerning is that it's stronger and it's ubiquitous. And when people start using it, especially males, before the age of 19, it very significantly increases the risk for psychosis. And that's a very real effect that we're seeing washing up to shore in the emergency departments across this country. And so what's happening now is that there's teenage males heavily using this very potent, very strong cannabis gummies or however they're finding, vaping it. There are all different ways of administering it. And they are changing fundamentally the trajectory of their mental health throughout their lives. Because once you have opened that Pandora's box of taking a brain to a point of psychosis, that has implications. It certainly sets you down a trajectory in terms of what medications your brain have been exposed to, but also I do think it makes you more prone to that state in the future. So I'm not interested in a big full green light to heavy cannabis use under the age of 19. I think over the age of 19, it's a different conversation. And what I've observed in my practice is that some people come to cannabis in a very intentional, periodic way, once a month, once every 2 weeks. And it can be good medicine. They use it to have a ritual, to be more mindful, to really appreciate something, to uncover truths, to enjoy music, whatever it is. I think it can play a positive role. And I also have patients who are using it every single day, and I've only ever witnessed that to have a negative effect on someone's overall mental health. It starts to impact their anxiety levels, depression levels, cognitive function, motivation. And I do think that's a real effect. So it's nuanced. It's not an all good or all bad substance, but under the age of 19, I do think we want to have a really honest conversation with our kids that I'm not saying this is off limits forever, but there are risks when we use it before 19.
Yep.
Yeah, and so for somebody who already has anxiety
that.
and who is on like a Prozac or something like that, and then layers on top of that, you know, cannabis. I mean, are we layering? I mean, layering more issues and throwing more fuel on the fire, I guess, so to speak.
I think it's really individual. Some people do feel an anti-anxiety effect from cannabis use. And so if that's how they're getting by through a particularly anxious period of time and it helps them sleep or it just helps them decompress, if it works for them, okay. The data is mixed and a little bit tipped towards it's not an effective anti-anxiety strategy, but I think it gets muddied by the fact that people react differently to it. Because some people get anxious from cannabis. Some people get paranoid from cannabis. For some people, it makes their heart rate faster and it creates a subjective experience of anxiety in their body. So I think the data is messy and you have to know for yourself.
Okay.
Does this make you more anxious or less anxious?
I know. I'm so sorry.
No, we have
Doctor.
stories. We have stories.
No. I'm off any gummies or anything. And not that I was ever on it, but I tried it when I was in Vegas. Okay. And I honestly thought somebody would have to take me to the doctor. And we went to like an actual store that had a bud master. And I said, well, yeah, let's just try it. Cause I'm not, you know, and so that's why we're laughing because like I was psychotic. I thought I was dying and I didn't want to spoil Jeanna's time.
Yes.
So I didn't want to tell her, and I'm at the pool. My eyes are big. Anyway, it was the worst thing I ever experienced. I was like, I'm never having that again. Okay, like that is not happening. And it was, you know, it wasn't like I got it off the street and just took it, and it was like, I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
So I think, I mean, I'm scaring all you people out there.
Yeah, but it is. It's one of those things where you know, small doses. See if it works for you. If it doesn't, you move on. You move on.
There's this like classic problem, which is that like the bud master, as you called it, whoever's, you know, at the cannabis dispensary, they are, in my mind, by definition, someone for whom cannabis is good. They like it. Their brain responds in a positive way.
They're used to it. And I wasn't used to it. So that could have had something to do with it.
I think they don't always have sympathy for the person whose brain responds in a different way to it.
Yeah.
You know, they took that job because they are passionate about this substance.
That's the mastery.
Right,
That's the mastery.
Oh my goodness.
That is
anyway,
amazing.
sorry. I mean, we were like,
amazing.
that was a funny story.
Yeah.
Like it was, I mean, I wasted a whole day of my vacation. I mean, literally.
You were mad about it.
I'm mad about it. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to take us one more place, well, maybe a couple more places, but you do talk about nuanced take on body positivity. And I wanted to hear, there's so much like, I mean, we haven't really talked about why we have such an epidemic of anxiety, but I do think like the social media and the influencers and
like,
what
let us count the ways of why, right?
And our young people, you know, even us. Okay, like forget the young. Let's add the old people to that too.
Yeah.
But
Talk about us.
particularly the young people that are, you know, are growing up. What is your take on that and anxiety?
So there's a lot to this. And I would say in the months since I wrote that section, I probably changed my phrasing, that it's not that I'm pushing back against body positivity, and I don't really know a better term to use, but here's what I mean by this. We are in a moment right now where we're having a beautiful reclamation against toxic diet culture, all these patriarchal pressures on women to be thin. And we're kind of saying, what? No, fuck you. I'm done with that. I'm done depriving myself. I'm done being hungry. I'm done striving for a particular size. I'm done thinking that that's what matters about me. I'm done performing everything and suffering to please the male gaze, like done with all that. And I'm here for that reclamation. The spirit of it is so good. And I just want to caution us that waiting with open arms is the processed food industry. And they're there to say, great, I'm here for you. Treat yourself. And I don't think they have our best interests in mind either.
Right.
The brilliant author Elise Lunan put this so well. She was like, when she started to move away from cleanses and all of that mindset, she ran right towards, as she calls it, eating like a teenage boy. And I think that this is the problem, is that as we're reclaiming, this way that we refeed is also not an act of self-love.
Right.
And if we lived in a food industry with integrity and transparency, eat to your heart's content. But the trouble is, these foods do not have love or integrity at their core. They derange our metabolism. They override our satiety signals. They inflame our bodies. They dysregulate our hormones. They wreck our gut. They wreck our mental health. And so we do have to be intentional about how we're feeding ourselves. And that, when I come forth ever with an idea of like, we need to be intentional about how we're feeding ourselves, it raises a lot of grievances, and people say, well, that's diet culture and that's triggering my eating disorder and da 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 da. And I really wish we lived in a landscape where I didn't have to say that, but we live in a world where they're looking to poison us and addict us to their foods around every corner. So I think that's just it. Our processed food industry, we have to be real about the fact that it has engineered our foods to be hyper palatable. And I think in an interesting twist, a lot of eating disorders, I think, actually have at the root the fact that these foods are engineered to be hyperpalatable, which is a nice medical euphemism for addictive. And when you start to eat in a world where there's addictive foods, if you bring to that any degree of trauma, of feeling lost, lonely, unmoored in your life, it behaves like a drug. In the way that all drugs, if you have a big hole to fill, drugs will come in and say, I will temporarily fill that hole for you, but also leave you feeling low afterward, lower than you started off. And so for some people, they reach for alcohol or they reach for cocaine or heroin. For other people, they're reaching for food. I reached for food when I was lonely and unmoored. And that was my drug. And it was a very socially condoned drug.
Yes.
And yet I knew it was a drug relationship for me. And for me, the exit ramp, and this is very touchy stuff, but for me, the exit ramp was actually identifying which foods in particular were behaving like drugs in my body, abstaining from those temporarily so that I regained a feeling of freedom around food, where I started to experience satiety, where I started to experience real hunger. And that actually was what allowed me to heal my relationship to food. And that did mean abstaining from the foods that behave like drugs. For the most part, it's processed foods. For some people, sugar. For some people, gluten and dairy are a factor because they can kind of behave like opiates for some people.
I mean,
when
there's
you
so much to
oh
unpack
God,
there,
I know. So, so when you say for a period of time, 3 months, 6 months, I know it probably varies by person. So
I did that too. I don't know how long.
So, but I'm kind of curious from allowing your body to kind of disconnect from it and start to show you signs of how much better you could feel without it.
How long
what's a good benchmark to?
That's
if listeners are listening, like how long would you want to abstain from something if you're feeling in that way, regardless of what it is?
There's so many different ways to think about this question. And for some people, they're interested in just healing on a physical level. Like emotionally, they're good, but they're like, oh, I don't get a period, or I'm inflamed, or I have acne, or I'm always bloated. So then you're doing it for, let's say, a period of a month or two, and you're reintroducing foods because you systematically want to assess, how do you feel when you're off these foods? How do you feel when you reintroduce them? And that gives us great information. And then what you do with that information is between you and your maker, but you want to at least know in your own body. For me, there was a clusterfuck of different problems that I was dealing with. And on the one hand, I had to heal my body, but on the other hand, I had to create some spaciousness where I could have the psychospiritual healing that would fundamentally address why I was reaching for a drug. And so it was a longer process for me. My body was slowly healing in the background. That was on the order of months, even really years, to be honest. But months, there was already quite a bit of improvement. But then the psychospiritual healing also had to occur. I had to find community. I had to feel in alignment in the work that I was doing. I needed to love myself. I need to reclaim my connection to intuition. All of that healing was why now I can eat those drug-like foods and not be triggered into a binge. But it was touch and go for a little while.
Because there's nothing there or less there that needs to be filled.
There's some things I will never reintroduce.
No.
I will never. Because I can't I mean, I don't know what happens. Okay. Like I have no idea.
No, agreed.
And you know, a lot of it's spiritual, and I've done a lot of spiritual work on this. And that's why I like your point of like,
Great.
let's reclaim, but not, well, I'm going to murder this, but like, let's reclaim our body. This is all good. And loving your body is good. All of this is great. It's just like, it's not an open invitation. It's not safe as an open invitation just to go have anything you want.
Correct.
And if you feel that way, I think it's a spiritual, I mean, we have DNA and trauma in our systems, all of you know, starving ourselves and, you know, all of these other things that exist within us. So this is a heavy, long, hard topic, and it's a journey.
It's a journey.
And it's a beautiful journey to go on and figure out for yourself, because everybody's different. Like you said, you could introduce it. There's some things, I mean, protein bars, do not put them in my house. Okay.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
I cannot have bars in my house.
They've been banished.
They've been
years.
banished.
Yes,
Okay, like,
yeah,
and what? Why? Okay, I have no idea why. Okay, because I'm a clean eater. Well, you know why, and so
Well, because that's junk marketed as health food.
exactly. And so you think, oh,
It's the most
great.
processed of the processed, really.
Yeah.
It's not real food. I mean, I think, Holly, you're touching on something I think is central to this, which is that it's the spirit behind why we're making these choices.
Yes.
And in the past, and for many of my patients, restriction was happening as a function of self-hatred. It was, why do I eat this? Why do I eat this junk food? Why do I avoid this food? It's because I hate myself. And what I want people to arrive at is actually a form of, I hate to say this dirty word, it's a form of restriction, but entirely imbued with self-love. Why am I eating this food? Why am I not eating this food? Because I love myself.
Yeah.
Because I want to feel good.
That's beautiful.
That is beautiful.
We want you to have the last word here today, but I do before.
I mean, she's fought for all the words up until now.
She
So it's
says it better than me too. It's so good.
Yes, I learned quickly. It's probably a good day for me to be a little bit more quiet.
Oh my God. Anyway, what I love is, and what I want to invite our audience to do, and you said this, and I'm going to re-say it, then you have the last word. And sadly, okay, like, listen,
I know.
we could have her forever.
I mean, if we were nice enough, maybe she'll come back, because I think this is such a beautiful. And we have spent time on our podcast in episodes leading up about this topic.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
I think it's critical. It's, we all know it's
Great
critical. It's perfect timing. There are so many layers to this, but I think just some simple, and the way you. I mean, I feel like literally like 100 pounds is off my shoulders, that this is not something that, you know,
it's not a life sentence.
Something snapped up here and I'm going to have to deal like there is something I have full control over to address.
Yeah. It's not a life sentence.
No.
I love that.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to give her the last word.
Yep.
But before that, I just want to say for our audience and what you talked about, I would just say, like, if you're not feeling vital, it doesn't even have to be like you can't poop or, you know, like if you're just not feeling vital, like your energy isn't optimal, because we're trying to say, like, we should be operating at optimal levels. And so if you're not feeling that way, that's a time, get the book, start out with the book and start looking at those things and just make small adjustments and see how you feel.
Yes.
And that will take you miles. Okay.
Yes.
The floor is yours, Dr. Ellen Vora.
Yes.
Here's a simplified roadmap. I think that's probably what's most helpful right now. The simplified roadmap is start with the physical. And basically, it's not high tech, it's not expensive, it's not inaccessible. Prioritize how you're sleeping, which usually requires some strategery, because we can't sleep in modern life, and it's mainly about light. So we have to learn how to be strategic about light. Move our bodies. Doesn't have to be all, like, we don't have to do the everything. It's maybe you take a walk after dinner, maybe do a few minutes of something simple. You dance, you do calisthenics in your living room, whatever's easy, affordable, accessible, pleasurable. And then eat real food and avoid fake food as much as possible. And then you shift to the psychospiritual. And I think there's two main components there. One is that we desperately need community. We need to prioritize that above everything else. And then we're spiritually starved. And that's our cultural birthright at this point. And so here we are, where we need to figure out what was always our truth, not what were we taught, not what have we done in rebellion to what we've been taught, but what feels true to us and where do we connect to a state of awe or transcendence. And that's all it needs to be, but we actually need to give ourselves permission to be in that state and to seek that.
Oh,
Mic drop moment.
How beautiful and what a gift.
Yes.
That is incredible.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much. We are very appreciative of your time. Thank you for your talents. Thank you for your message going out in the airwaves and getting across.
The story is beautiful. Your story is beautiful for all of us.
Yes. And thank you for being a badass powerhouse and getting your message out there so that we feel hope.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you both so much. I love this podcast. I love the energy you guys bring to it. This has been fun for me. I will come back if you invite me back. And
of course.
Till next time.
Yes. Where do you live exactly? No, I'm not.
No, we're going to go ride bikes with her.
Yes, we're going to go ride bikes.
And do the podcast on a bike with a helmet. At least
you can send your address later. But yes, we would love to have you back. Safety first, for sure.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Everything will be in the show notes.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.